Joining us this morning at Post 9, this time Inside.com founder and CEO Jason Calacanis, and out west, Mark Asset Management President Morris Mark. Gentlemen, good morning to all of you. Our top story this morning is Apple releasing those fiscal fourth quarter numbers after the close. First annual revenue decline in 15 years. For the quarter, sales and net income both lower compared to a year ago for the third time in a row. Apple did beat estimates on the top and the bottom lines thanks to better than expected iPhone sales. Looking ahead, Tim Cook says Apple is returning to growth, issued a bullish holiday outlook, and commented on the company's product pipeline, including autos. Take a listen.
We're always looking at new things, and the car space in general is an area that it's clear that there's a lot of technologies that will either become available or will be able to revolutionize the car experience. And so it's interesting from that point of view, but certainly nothing to announce today.
All right, so Jason, is he being unfairly criticized by the sell side or not?
I had to wake up. Is that Tim Cook speaking again? It's like your uncle who puts you to sleep every time. He says so much of nothing when he speaks. Listen, you want to talk about the car, or you want to talk about the phone first?
Let's do the phone. I think we need to touch on
the phone is, obviously we all know we're reaching peak smartphone. And when you look at that chart of sales, it's going up, 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 and then it's flattening. So now we have to ask, is it flattening and going down like BlackBerry and AOL and all those other great products? Or is it going to flatten and just sort of trend along? I believe it's going to trend along. It's the greatest product ever made by Apple. People who buy an Apple iPhone are not going to give it up, but they're obviously taking longer to refresh them. And what are the new features on this phone that are absolutely compelling? You can take a hipster blurry photo, which nobody does, and you can take it in the shower with you. Okay, amazing. Not the reason to upgrade your phone. So I don't think they're going to see growth there. But Yum, when you look at that services revenue, that's the Yum in all of this. $25 billion a year now, trailing, and it went up something like 20% year over year. Yeah, I mean, and if you think about Netflix, Spotify, and a lot of these other services, Uber and Lyft, these are services businesses. They're getting good at services. They were terrible at services, and now they're getting good at it, and it's going to be a highly profitable business, and I think it could double every 4 years. If it doubles every 4 years, you know, this could be something that could be very material. If you're not going to upgrade your phone, maybe you'll pay $15 a month to us. Maybe you'll pay $20 a month to us in services.
But Morris, as a shareholder, as an investor, is it worth waiting 2-4 years to see what happens with services and whether or not that actually becomes a bit of Apple's overall earnings?
Well, I feel the way Jason does about services, except I think we're more optimistic than he is. The rate of growth in service revenue is phenomenal. The opportunity there is astounding. The demand for apps is accelerating. People are spending more money on Apple Play, and in fact, their largest market in that area now is China, where their phone penetration is still pretty low. So if you're just looking at that as an aspect of the business, it's a plus. We just look at this company as really reflecting the kind of philosophy we have as investors. We want to own great businesses that are going to build value at an above average rate. And if we can find them at this kind of valuation, it makes it even more extraordinary.
Does it matter?
It's a cheap stock with
yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask Morris whether it matters to you, whether supply constraints matter to you, or if that's just a great problem to have right now.
Well, number one, it's not the worst problem in the world to have. Everything matters to us because while we take a broad perspective, we look at things very intensively. And I think the thing that struck me about the quarter was, had you gone back a month and looked at those numbers, you would not have believed they were going to generate them. And if you go to the iPhone 7, which you might say is a step up from the 6, it's really showing very strong demand. And I think that one of the things that you have to realize is that there are a lot of intensive phone users. The phone, this thing that I have in my pocket, is probably the single most important device that people have around the world. And if they can get a better one, if they can afford a better one, they will get it. So the 7 is a step up in power. It's a step up in camera. It's a step up in battery, and you start adding all those things up, and it gives you strong demand. And they're at the point, one of the things they said yesterday was, it's hard to make a forecast because we're selling as many as we can make. That's a high-class problem.
Right.
That sounds like a yum-yum from Morris. I don't know who's going to give us a yum-yum, but it feels like a yum-yum to me.
John?
Well, guys, I think the overall theme of this quarter is the elimination of downside. I mean, coming into this cycle, people were worried the iPhone 7 won't sell. There's not enough innovation. Samsung, with all this stuff that they're trying to throw into their higher-end phones, is going to blow Apple out of the water. Does the services story really have legs? And we see answers for all of those. The iPhone 7 is good enough to drive a strong upgrade cycle. It's a supply problem, not a demand problem. Samsung has shot itself in the foot at the very high end with the Note 7 recall and pulling that off the market. So the question now is, where exactly is the upside over the next 4 quarters for Apple? You can look out beyond and wonder about cars, but I think that's a waste of time. You can look at the Mac announcement where we expect to see this new interface, this touch panel on the Mac, bringing Touch ID to the Mac and sort of tying that more into the ecosystem along the theme of OS X Sierra, or Mac OS Sierra, they're calling it now. So I think that really needs to be the focus. How much more can Apple squeeze profit-wise out of this cycle? And where's the next bigger upsurge in growth? We're already looking ahead to the next iPhone due next year. Now, that doesn't look like such a rough few quarters in between now and then, given that, again, elimination of downside, guys.
Let's talk some cash management, guys. Obviously, the cash pile growing to $238 billion. If the cash hoard was its own company, it would be the 7th largest in the S&P, the 14th largest public company in the world. Jason, is that being used efficiently, that number right there?
Obviously not. I mean, there's so many amazing companies that you could put this to work with. Now, obviously, the Tesla train has left the station. I don't think they can buy it. But if you look at the services sector, they've been obsessed with services. They seem to be able to do that right. They did hardware well. They're doing services well. They're terrible at software. We'll get to that later. But if they're good at services, that puts Spotify, a ride-sharing service perhaps, or Netflix, or a Hulu, someone like that into the mix, right? And when you see AT&T looking at content, this makes it very interesting. Disney's looking at Twitter. There's some content play or services, and what I think they should do is they should take a book from Amazon Prime. How many people have Apple Music and iCloud, and Apple Care? Probably nobody has all three. Why don't we put all three of those together, yum, 10, 20 bucks a month, and then they can build up. Maybe, what if 10, 20% of users do that? They get 100 million people giving them 20 bucks a month for those services in one package. So you don't have to make a decision 3, 4, 5 times with your services pack. I get Spotify, I get Netflix, or movies, music, backup, care for my product, and cloud storage. This would be an amazing product for them to launch.
It's an interesting proposition. Certainly, the company has begun talking a little bit more about acquisitions in recent quarters, but Morris, the problem with the cash is that so much of it is held abroad. If there was a deal to be had, would you want to see Apple bring this back to the U.S. or continue to use it where it's domiciled?
Okay, well, number one, if I look at it on a near-term basis, they don't have to bring it back right now because their borrowing power is enormous. I mean, this is just a bulletproof balance sheet and a company generating free cash flow in excess of $11 a share every year. And I say in excess of that number. So, we have a lot of investments that we like, but this one I think is, at this point, very prototypical. There's tremendous amount of optionality here. The balance sheet's optionality. I think you did touch on one thing, Kayla, and that's the fact that after this election, we may or may not get corporate tax reform. If we're fortunate enough to do so, that'll just help a lot of American companies like Apple to put their money to work far more productively. I'm not counting on it, but it sure would be a nice thing.
Yeah, I mean, how Obama has to solve this is just a complete failure of leadership. So we're getting penalized 3 times with this overseas money. 1, we don't get the taxes. 2, we don't get to buy American companies with it.
Is there
and
nothing
3,
to buy overseas?
No.
Not enough.
Tell me a great company overseas.
Spotify.
Okay, and now where's the second? Okay, Carl, I proved my point.
And financial, maybe.
Maybe, but all the great companies are here. Let's bring that money home and create jobs here, and let's buy the companies here. It's just absolutely a complete disaster that we can't figure out a way to come up with a number that's okay with Tim and Google to bring this money home. Failure of leadership.
Well, certainly repatriation is going to be a much louder discussion in the coming weeks after this election is done. Morris, Jason, great to have you two guys. John, we're going to talk to you in a few minutes. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.